Hello, everybody. Today we are back with another 2028 election prediction. This time a bit more of a stretch. I definitely understand that it is a bit more of a stretch, but I thought an interesting hypothetical. Joe Biden runs again in 2028, assuming he's still alive and hasn't passed away. Of course, our prayers are with him after his cancer diagnosis. But this is assuming that 4 years down the line, President Biden is still alive and still involved in politics and decides to run for a non-consecutive term as president of the United States, very similar to Donald Trump, somehow becomes the nominee and goes up against J.D. Vance, the current vice president of the United States, Trump's uh, pick to be vice president. So an interesting hypothetical. Obviously, this entire prediction is contingent on how successful Donald Trump's term as president is. What I use to basis these predictions is historical precedent, historical data, each candidate, my own opinion of each candidate. Approval of Donald Trump, of course, is going to have a major role in this prediction because Vance represents the administration. And Biden ended his approval of his last term very poorly. But with that being said, I do think that Biden would perform very poorly across the board. However, there are some states that I do think he would keep in his safe category. Um, but I don't think that this would end well for Joe Biden if he did decide to run in 2028. I'm giving him 113 safe states. I think JD Vance will perform very well, assuming Joe Biden is in suffering from cognitive decline, which there have been a lot of revelations that have been made over the past since he's left office and even when he was in office. Then I don't think that this would bode well for him. Vance would win Iowa, Ohio, and Maine second by a safe margin, as well as Florida with 179 electoral votes. Keep in mind, when Joe Biden dropped out of the presidential race against Donald Trump in July 21st, 2024, polls were showing that Joe Biden was losing not just in the key states that he needed to win, example being Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, but he was losing in what were considered likely to solid Democrat states. States like New Jersey, states like New Mexico, states like Colorado, states even like New York were becoming competitive. Trump had his rally there in Madison Square Garden. Kamala Harris ended up winning it by very low double digits, about 12 to 13 point margin. Compare that to Biden's win in 2020. He won it by about 20 to 25 points. That is a significant shift in favor of Trump. With Biden again on the ticket, and considering how poorly Americans view his original term as president, in addition to the fact that he probably would be continuing to struggle on the campaign trail and in presidential debates, especially against somebody like J.D. Vance, who's relatively young and articulate, I can't imagine that those poll numbers will be better, if not, much worse. With that being said, I still think the state of New York would be a likely Biden state, as well as the state of Illinois, and as well as the state of Connecticut. But that is it for likely Biden states. All of the rest are going to be relatively competitive in terms of Vance having a chance to win them. Likely Vance states, this is going to be Texas, Arizona, Nevada. Arizona, Nevada, especially, and Texas as well, have seen resemblant of the national polls. We've seen a shift in Hispanic support in terms of the Republican Party, in terms of Donald Trump, Vance representing the Republican Party. I do think he would successfully win the Hispanic vote in the Southwest and in general in the South and Texas, garnering a likely victory in those states, winning those states by a likely margin. Now, that's it for the likely Vance states, but that gets him to 236 electoral votes. Let's head in to our lean Biden states. Maine at large would be lean Biden. Biden still would perform decently well in the Northeast, winning the state of Maine at large by a lean margin, as well as the state of New Jersey, which was surprisingly competitive with Kamala Harris on the ballot this time around, probably even more competitive with Biden on the ballot in 2028. J.D. Vance, lean margin, Nebraska, 2nd Congressional District, the state of North Carolina, the state of Georgia, the Rust Belt, entirely. J.D. Vance would win the presidency in this scenario. J.D. Vance tying Donald Trump, matching Donald Trump's highest number at 313 electoral votes. When we took it the tilt Biden states, this would be the state of Colorado, the state of New Mexico. But I don't think that in this scenario, Joe Biden would pierce 200 electoral votes. I see J.D. Vance actually getting 340 to Joe Biden's 198, a very, very, the worst performance of a Democrat nominee for president of the United States, since Michael Dukakis, a Democrat, not garnering over 200 electoral votes. This is probably the clearest case scenario for a Republican to beat a Democrat, where a Democrat doesn't obtain at least 200 electoral votes in the Electoral College. Vance getting 340, winning it in a modern electoral landslide. Joe Biden, as people watching this can tell, I don't believe Joe Biden would be a very good candidate in 2028. Of course, it doesn't seem like he has any intention of pursuing any more elected office, but given this hypothetical scenario, this is what I believe would happen. With that being said, thank you for watching this video. Comment below your thoughts on this prediction. What stuff would you keep the same, and what stuff would you change? Anyway, have a great day. I'll see you all soon.